Good evenings from Singapore. Again, with not kind of a starlight background here. You will recognize Angie and me very easily with our blue screens, and Jyoti, who is also presenting today with a plain whitish background. So today we have our first thematic session, and our session focuses on an understanding on education for sustainable development. The topic sounds very straightforward, and one might think that everybody knows what it is about, but we had a few years ago a project on this particular theme, and we realized that there's still a lot to learn also among teachers and students, although most of you practice education for sustainable development probably every day. So what's our agenda for today? First, we set our learning objectives, what we hope to get out of this session. We do a general introduction to sustainable development that's very briefly done by myself, and then I hand over to Jyoti, who's well prepared to guide you through points 3 to 7, and that's education for sustainable development, then ESD in an education and learning context. We talk about education for sustainable development at the secondary education level. She has a lot of resources prepared on ESD, which are mainly by UNESCO. And last but not least, we have one small assignment for each of you, and we hope that you're able to help us completing this before next session. So let's focus on the learning objectives. We have 3 objectives. The first one is we want to refresh our knowledge or your knowledge on sustainable development in general, and then enhance your understanding on education for sustainable development in particular. Then we want to showcase the importance of ESD to achieve the SDGs. And last but not least, we want to highlight the role of teachers and students at the secondary education level to drive ESD, because it has to start as early as possible in the education level. And in general, we hope again that this is a platform for you for self-reflection, to get more resources, and to become experts on the topic. So, introduction to sustainable development, and maybe we start with a very simple question. We haven't prepared a Mentimeter today, but we thought maybe you can just type in the chat what you associate with sustainable development. Single words, you can also write a short sentence, just help us defining what is sustainable development. And I wait a few seconds and see who's the first who types in the chat. What do you associate with sustainable development? Don't think too long. The suggestions can come. Of course, sustainability, yes. Equality is from Anjay. Nature from Pavel. It goes into the environment. You can type also more than one. Environmental protection. Knowledge and skills that will stay with us for longer. Nice. Creativity, the future, of course. Let's wait for a few more. Low carbon, yeah. Live similarly to the one our grandparents live, no waste. Emissions to take actions to stop weather warming. Okay, so Jyoti is moving to the next slide. Aha, I was waiting for this. Economics, thanks Jana. So the definition for sustainable development, and that's an official definition. Does anybody want to try that? Or we help you? I think we can combine it. Anybody wants to try? Who knows the official definition of sustainable development? You can also raise your hand. Unmute yourself. Okay. Anybody? Well, then I think we'll share with you the official definition. It's interesting. Everybody has a concept of sustainable development and knows more or less what it is, but the actual definition, it's the development that meets, the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. I think a lot of the keywords you typed in the chat are in there. And we have prepared for you and looked for you out for you for one video which explains it all in 3 minutes. It's an excellent video, which we have first seen by a presentation from UNESCO. It's not by UNESCO, it's actually by BIC, which is the pen company, if I'm not wrong. Well, somehow still linked to school and education. But here you can get a very good understanding on sustainable development. Jyoti, you can play the video, please. Jyoti, if you can just ensure that the sound is on.
Sustainable development. Everybody's talking about it. But what do those two words really mean? Let's take a couple of minutes to see what sustainable development is all about. The idea first emerged in the late 1980s as a response to the world's growing social and environmental problems. With globalization, the inequality gap between rich and poor countries is widening every day, and the projections for population growth are alarming. How are we going to feed a total of 9 billion people in 2050? How can we offer everyone access to clean drinking water, healthcare, education? How can we protect biodiversity and take concrete action against climate change? How can we make sure that industrial development means progress for everyone? The proposed solution was a new kind of development, or rather a variation of the traditional model called, quite simply, sustainable development. The term was officially defined in 1987 as part of the preparations for the Rio Earth Summit. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Does that sound a little abstract to you? Let's put it this way. Sustainable development means that growth must be accomplished with respect for nature and humankind. And where is sustainability achieved? Right here, at the crossroads of economic goals, social responsibility, and environmental protection. Now, are you wondering whether a company can combine respect for the environment, social equity, and commercial success? Well, the answer is yes. Not only that, but sustainable development creates value. Here's how. Upgrading production tools to use less energy and water is good for the environment and for the pocketbook. Offering eco-designed products and packaging that use just what's necessary saves materials and reduces shipping costs. Paying attention to employees, improving their quality of life at work and helping them develop their skills all serve to strengthen their engagement. And stronger employee engagement means better overall performance. Creating products that are accessible to the world's poorest populations means opening new markets, the ones whose populations are going to grow the fastest between now and 2050. Monitoring the working conditions offered by suppliers and subcontractors means minimizing risks that could damage the company's image. As you can see, sustainable development affects just about everything. More and more companies today understand that they have important economic, social, and environmental responsibilities and are committed to making a difference. The ones that seize this opportunity to create value will find that their success is, in a word, sustainable.
Thank you so much, Jyoti. Well, even though this video is from a business entity, we think it's probably one of the most suitable to explain in a very short time what sustainable development is about. I think you all know Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We have prepared for you a few graphics which you can also use for your students later and go a little bit deeper into that topic. Jyoti, can you go to the next slide. Yes. So something which not everybody knows. Everybody has heard about Agenda 2030, probably a few SDGs people can also identify, but not everyone knows the 5 Ps of sustainable development. And without achieving or without integrating these 5 Ps, sustainable development will not happen. And this is about people, it's about the planet, it's about prosperity, maintaining peace, and it's about keeping partnerships. So let's look a little bit closer into these 5 Ps, which form a framework for sustainable development. Here you can see the 17 development goals, nicely categorized in which area these sustainable development goals are in a way active, and which are they targeting at. So for example, no poverty, zero hunger, health and well-being, quality education, gender equality. These are all directly targeted to people. Then we have, of course, one SDG 16 for peace. Partnership is an own goal by itself. And you see, for example, at the bottom, a number of SDGs which are specifically targeted towards the planet. So that's one way how to show a framework of the SDGs. And then we have always 3 dimensions when we talk about sustainable development, and that's the economy, that's the society, and that's the environment. And I was happy to see in the chat that you have mentioned all of them. I was waiting for the last one. Jana included it here with economics. So sustainable development will not function if one of that is out of balance. And currently, most of the time, economic goals are driven, but harmful for environment, harmful and partially also to society. We had in the chat also the focus on equality and equity. So whenever we think about SDGs, always these 3 dimensions have to be in sync. So among the 17 SDGs, I would like to ask you a question. Which one do you think is the most important one? And I'm going to introduce to you the annotate function in Zoom. So if you move your mouse to the button View Options, you can find under this here some options which are called Annotate. And you click on that, and then you can mark with a cross or with an icon which one you think is most important. So you move your mouse to the top, View Options, click on that, and then you have a few options how you can view your options. Click on Annotate, and then you can mark. Do you see it? Do you find it, or you have problems? So for example, I now click on quality education. So I invite you to do the same, but you can pick any other goal which you think is the most important one. Okay, Agnieszka, click zero hunger. I hope the others have found the options. Okay, I see David and Jana. David, reduced inequality. Jana, I think, also clicked on quality education. What about the others? If you don't find the annotate option, please let us know. This is also about enhancing a little bit our understanding of Zoom and what kind of functions are available here. Okay, I see more coming. Zero hunger. Pavel is somewhere at climate action, life below water. No. Okay, partnerships for the goal. Pavel has clicked on climate action. Okay. Interesting. Somebody thinks sustainable cities and communities. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think the majority of you has clicked either on quality education or partnership for the goals. So let's take a look which one is the most important one. Actually, it's none of them, and I'm not, let me just read clear the annotate function. Or Jyoti, can you clear the annotate function here? We need to
yes.
clear all drawings. I do it. Okay, I've already done it. Wonderful. So actually there is no SDG which is more important than the others, because all of them are interconnected with each other. And I'm not going into detail in this, into this graphic, because it is very small. It's, however, very tricky also to show this on a small computer screen. But what you can see here is an overview, is a matrix, how some of the goals are influencing other goals. Yes, exactly. Adam says they're all equally important. But here, this graphic in particular shows you which goal, for example, is influencing, for example, SDG 4. How is it linked to the other goals? And you will see that some goals have stronger linkages to certain goals than others. And I encourage you to take a look at this when we share with you the PowerPoint in detail. Some of it is quite surprising. We thought, coming from the education sector, education is the foundation for everything, that education is one of the most influencing goals, but it's not always listed there as such. So take your time after this session today and study this, this matrix a little bit more in detail. Okay, and with this very short summary of, in general, the SDGs, I'll hand over to Jyoti, who focuses on education for sustainable development. Jyoti, your turn.
Thank you, Leonie, for such a great overview of sustainable development. I think that laid the foundation for me to now talk about education for sustainable development. So what do we mean by education for sustainable development? So UNESCO put education at the heart of Agenda 2030 because, of course, without educating people, we cannot raise awareness about sustainable development goals or issues that concern sustainability. So education is really important in the process of achieving SDGs. And why? Because education has a very strong impact on different aspects of our life. For example, health, employment, income, and advancing gender equality. And then education is also important because through only educating people, you can transmit the values and skills to make informed decisions and make better choices and shape our societies in a more sustainable way. And just to give you a very brief overview of how education became a part of sustainable development issues. So around 1980s, slowly when different types of issues started affecting the sustainable existence of our planet, policymakers and leaders, they started talking about sustainable development and raising awareness through education. And then in 90s, first, the World Congress for Education and Communication on Environment and Development, called ECOED, was held in Canada, where more conversations were developed on this topic. And during 2000 and from 2000 to 2010, that was one of the most crucial period for education for sustainable development, because then UNESCO or United Nations, they introduced the decade for education for sustainable development. So as educators, I'm pretty sure many of you know or may have heard about the UN decade for ESD. Basically, that's from 2005 to 2014, where UNESCO introduced different types of initiatives to empower educators, and through educators empower the future generations. And then one of the very important meetings were held in Japan, where they launched a global action program called GAP, and they set the priority areas for education for sustainable development. And then also during 2015, they started introducing different types of achievement goals through global education monitoring report. So if you go to UNESCO websites, there are on a yearly basis, they have different monitoring reports on education. If you are interested, we will also share some of the resources in our e-learning platform for the global monitoring, global education monitoring report. And then in 2016, not so long ago, education policymakers and leaders, they realized that we cannot just talk about education in a formal setting. We also have to empower people through other non-formal settings as well. For example, if I give you an example of how organizations do that, at ASAF's education department have different projects under higher education projects and for youth as well, which is mostly informal education. So for a youth program, we have a lot of projects that happens on a non-formal basis, where young people from all 51 SM countries focus on different sustainable development goals, and they work towards the sustainable, towards achieving the sustainable development goals through their through various activities. And just about 2 years ago in 2019, during the 40th session of UNESCO General Conference, they adopted a global framework for ESD called Education for Sustainable Development and towards achieving the SDGs or ESD for 2030. And then last year, they had UNESCO had a conference where policymakers and leaders, they started talking about scaling up different initiatives on ESD and also increasing the funding. So if you go through various United Nations website, especially UNESCO, you'll see that different initiatives are mentioned and listed on their website. So here, again, may I request you to type in the chat box, what do you know about the definition of ESD? Do you think there is a definition of ESD? And if it is, then what do you think it includes? So with maybe just a few words, or you can just mention whether you have heard about the definition of ESD or not. So I'll give you a few seconds. Everyone is quiet, maybe.
Do you mean what we do at school, or about how we implemented this new view into the local curriculum or national curriculum?
Okay, I think, so basically, have you heard of a definition of education for sustainable development? Or if you haven't heard, do you think there's a set definition for education for sustainable development? I see someone never heard about that. Andres wrote, okay.
I heard. And we teach it at school.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Agnieszka said she also never heard of it. Okay, let's see if there is a definition. So actually there is no fixed definition for ESD because it's a process towards ensuring sustainable development. And there is a vision for ESD. So the vision includes a world where everyone has the opportunity to benefit from quality education and learn the values, behavior, and lifestyles required for a sustainable future and for positive societal transformation. And education for sustainable development is a process where learning to make informed choices and decisions, where the learners, they consider the long-term impact that the choices have. So this is in a few words from UNESCO, what the vision includes for education for sustainable development. And here is the educational framework. In this framework, you can see that, okay, if you look at the image here, you have a current state that is, let's say, unsustainable. That's our present scenario. And then the end goal is to achieve a state that is sustainable. So that's our vision, right? But in between, we need to have some conditions that help us achieve that vision. So that's where comes as educators building, for example, pedagogical skills to talk about sustainable development and to not only to educate the learners, but also to be able to evaluate. So both for teachers and educators, what are the sustainable competencies, for example? And this framework is can be divided into 5 steps, where it has a participatory vision for sustainability, and then it has the conditions that enable sustainability and the competences. So what are the competences that I can look into or measure whether or not someone has a very good understanding of sustainability that can help that specific individual to make choices or decisions that are beneficial for the future of our planet. And of course, pedagogies and learning strategies, it's a continuous process where we have to constantly change what we are going to teach our students, how can we empower our educators with new pedagogical strategies. And of course, we have to monitor so that we can update the competencies depending on the need, depending on the time of the time and the need. Now we will go a bit deeper into education for sustainable development in an education and learning context. What does it mean when we are talking about teaching sustainable development issues related to SDGs and sustainable development to the students? Or what does it mean for a teacher to build competencies and framework to teach ESD or implement ESD initiatives in their classrooms, for example? So in a learning context, when we talk about education for sustainable development, it's about transformative education that help the learners to understand issues related to sustainable development and reorient their thoughts to a more sustainable approach. So there are 5 steps where it's about learning to transform first the individual self, and then learning to know, so keeping yourself updated about the sustainable development issues and trends, and then learning to be. So it's knowing is not enough, but I also need to do something about it, take action. So learning to be, learning to be is basically changing your mindsets, changing your perspective with the information that you have been exposed to on sustainable development issues, and then taking actions, which is learning to do. And then doing by yourself is not enough, so you need to empower other people so that there is a societal impact, there is a broader impact, so that's learning to live together. So that's, in a way, the 5 steps of education for sustainable development in a learning context. And education for sustainable development is not possible without partnerships. If you look at this image created by UNESCO, you can see that whatever students are learning in a school, so they're gaining the information from a school, they're absorbing information that are important to understand how can we achieve a sustainable planet. And then if they are going to take actions and empower others, they need to work in a community, and they need to be supported by the community so that they can implement, for example, if they are taking an action, right? So you have the community, you have family, you have parents who are involved in the process. So education for sustainable development requires mostly all kinds of different kinds of partnership in an education ecosystem. And all in all, so education for sustainable development is about empowering yourself and empowering others with the relevant knowledge and awareness needed to achieve the SDGs. And why are we talking about education for sustainable development at the secondary education level? Of course, it's because as the educator of secondary school students, you know how important this phase is for students, because this is one of the most crucial phases in someone's life where they start to develop their attitudes, mindsets, and gain knowledge that has a very long-term impact in their life. So, of course, UNESCO considers secondary education level as a crucial step for a learner's life, and they recognize that secondary education level, it has to be transformative so that the learners gain not only just the skills related to their survival, but also it has elements that create holistic understanding of their development and empowering the whole human persona in a societal context, not just not just at the individual level. And what can the educators do? What's their role? Of course, educators are the facilitators who can guide learners to get the transformative education, to change their mindsets. And of course, educators at the secondary education level, they have a very strong impact in students' life. And so the teachers actually bear a great responsibility to educate the future generation about sustainable development goals and prepare them with the kind of knowledge that they need to make informed choices. And so various organizations started building framework for teachers because, of course, when education, the teaching education for sustainable development was introduced, there was no framework because it was not introduced so long ago. And there are different countries approach it differently, but there is a framework was developed by a few universities. We will share the link of the whole document for this framework so that you can read and understand a bit more. But this framework has mainly 3 competencies. So the competencies are for teachers, teaching. So you need to know how to teach issues related to sustainable development, and reflecting. Teaching is not enough. Depending on this context, you also need to reflect. For example, let's say an initiative in Estonia might not be relevant for Singapore. So you need to reflect what I can do depending on such initiative, what is relevant for my country, or what is relevant for my societal and cultural context to achieve that goal. And the most important one is networking. So as we saw an image before where we talked about ESD requires partnerships. So that's why for teachers, it's very important that they network. For example, all of you are here from all 4 Visegrad countries, and you will be working together. You will be empowering each other with knowledge and understanding of ESD through through this project. And here, of course, within this context, different aspects of learning are important. Values and ethics, for example, emotions and strategic thinking, and of course, the foundation knowledge that you need to understand issues related to SDGs. So we talked about teachers. Now, if we move on to students, how can we understand that our students are learning about sustainable development goals and issues related to sustainable development goals? So there are 3 learning domains. First of all, cognitive, and the second one is socio-emotional domain, and the third one is behavioral domain. So for all these 3 domains, for all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, UNESCO prepared a document called Education for Sustainable Development Goals Learning Objectives, where teachers get to learn about different objectives for different goals. We already shared the document in our reading list. If you have difficulties finding it, please let us know. We will specifically share that one again, because this document is really, really important. And we will not go into we will not basically have time to talk about all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and learning objectives under all 3 domains. But since this project specifically tackles climate action, which is SDG 13, let's take a look at what it means. What are the learning objectives for each of these domains? So at the cognitive learning objectives, or the cognitive level, basically it's about knowing, right? So it's about what do I know about, for example, greenhouse gas? Do I understand what it means? And do I understand how it's created? For example, which human activities are creating these specific issues? And do I know what are the impact? And do I know how to prevent it? So knowing is considered the cognitive learning objectives. And then knowing is not enough. So we have the socio-emotional learning objectives, where it's mainly about do I understand what, depending on what I know, what this, for example, company does is ethical or not? Do I know how to encourage other people to learn and to protect climate? Do I know how to collaborate with a lot of people so that the impact that I'm trying to create is bigger? And can I recognize for example, harmful effects or the potentials of creating protecting the climate? So socio-emotional learning objectives, it's more about empowering others, working together with others, and also recognizing what are the impacts, what are the challenges. And at the behavioral level, of course, it's about, okay, I know about it and I'm very active empowering other people on this specific issue, but am I doing anything? So are you taking any actions, and are you reflecting on it to change your behavior, for example? So this informed choices, we have been talking a lot about informed choices when we talk about definition of sustainable development and the vision for education for sustainable development. All this comes down to behavioral changes. So behavioral learning objectives is really important to reflect. So as an educator, when you are teaching or implementing an initiative on ESD, these are the 3 areas where you can look into to evaluate your students or to evaluate an initiative to understand whether or not you have achieved the goal that you wanted to achieve on a particular topic, for example, or a particular sustainable development goals. And here, so we will take again some time to reflect. So as you know, there are 5 steps to education for sustainable development, which are, it's here. And I also kept the all sustainable development goals here just for you to have all the information all together. And then we take some time to reflect. So what are you currently doing in your classroom to promote sustainable development? I think for this one, it's okay. You don't need to type anything on the chat box. I think it's better if we speak up. So whoever wants to share anything, depending on what you have been doing or what you want to do in the future based on the information you got today. So maybe we can have a very short group chat if anyone would like to share anything. I know some of you, or maybe most of you, are doing something to promote sustainable development.
Okay, so I think that I can start.
Of course, go ahead, Adam.
Yes, I have done several projects with my students, and in those projects we try to support the ideas we are discussing here. So these are projects with other European countries, but also with Asian countries, in collaboration with ASEF. So they were devoted to values. So students realized what values are important to them, what matters in their life. We talked also about the importance of knowledge. Why should we learn? How should we learn to do it effectively, etc. So yes, I can say that I try to incorporate these ideas in project work, and I work with my students every year. I try to have at least one international project, and we consider and we work on different aspects of the matters we are discussing today in this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Just to add also, Adam conducted a very interesting project for ASEF ClassNet, which was on happiness. So I think that promotes the Sustainable Development Goal 3, which is on well-being. So yeah, so that's an initiative, whether you knew or not, but you definitely contributed to sustainable development. Anyone? Anyone else?
My school is in a highly disadvantaged area with highly disadvantaged parents and students. So our main aim is to teach them or learn, they have to learn that they can do something. So every year we take part in a very interesting program. It's called 72 Hours Without Compromise. When our school tries to teach the parents, the locals and students that they can do. So everybody can do anything. This is actually this weekend, 3 days program.
Oh, wow. That sounds really inspiring. Thank you for sharing, Gabriela.
Okay.
So anyone else? I would like to invite David to share how the Sciencescope, because one of the goals for Sciencescope also is to, through education technology, contribute to education for sustainable development. David, would you like to share a few words about how you contribute to sustainable development through Sciencescope?
Yeah, so I think what I think is interesting is that we became sort of significantly aware of the Sustainable Development Goals a few years ago, and realized that they map very closely with the sorts of things that we had been working on in the way of projects around, particularly around education, but also I think of projects that we've done in Singapore, which have looked at vertical farming and all sorts of interesting educationally based projects which fit within the sort of sustainable goals outlook. And of course, it's in the last year or two, it's become so much more relevant and significant for everybody. So we now very much focus our business around presenting it as a sustainable approach to education. So bringing sustainability into education, both as a process in terms of how you work, but also in terms of getting young people to understand the SDGs and how they work. So really, I would say nowadays, majority of projects we work on have some really direct aspect associated with the SDGs. We're doing this project, obviously, with ASEF, which is really exciting. We've been working with Expo 2020 Live to develop the IoT platform that you'll be using later. And we're currently working on a project, for instance, at the University of Glasgow, where we're looking at new buildings and how they can be made more sustainable using digital twins. So yeah, it's become a really central part of what we do, and arguably the focus of everything we do nowadays.
Thank you for sharing, David. I think we have time, so if anyone would like to share, if any of you are doing anything in your school, or if you haven't done so far, but you can think of ideas right now that you think you can implement to promote sustainable development. Anyone would like to share? Okay, I'm pretty sure that after all the thematic sessions and the peer-to-peer knowledge building sessions and the technical sessions, when everyone goes into full-on the implementation mode, and after that we'll be learning from you how to promote sustainable development. Can I quickly invite Leonie to share some of the work that we are doing at the education department to promote sustainable development, mainly maybe from non-formal perspective? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jyoti. I think the concept of education for sustainable development is, for many, it sounds like a very big, massive concept, but it starts with very simple, small steps. And that can be, for example, already in the school canteen, where the school has a policy that not of certain food which will be sold, there's no packaging. In classroom, there's recycling, small things which are very basic and which are probably already so much internalized we don't see it anymore because we are already following it. And then it goes into maybe more complex topics, like one Adam has, for example, referred to about values in life. I think we had here in the chat, Andre spoke about equality and equity, which is more like a mindset which has to be developed and instilled in young people. And that understanding of what does it mean to be equal citizens, what does it mean, what is the human rights approach, etc. So probably most of you are already working on it without knowing it, and that's why it's also difficult to come up with a definition, because it's probably quite natural. To Jyoti's question, we run a number of non-formal education projects for young people. They are slightly older than secondary school, but starting with 19 years. And we link our projects very often to local community work. Volunteering, for example, is also something which is a very strong component to drive education to drive sustainable development, but also has to be promoted through education for sustainable development. What does it mean if I commit my time? How do I spend my time best? How can I invest with my free time after school in a good cause, be it now a social cause, an environmental cause, etc. And probably many of your students have these kind of clubs, associations after school, which are in one way or another focusing on that. And probably the most well-known association is Fridays for Future, where a lot of secondary school students actually dedicate their time into, and sometimes even spending a lot of time instead of going to school on this course to push for more sustainable actions by the policy, by the business, etc. So we interpret that silence, that you are very much doing it, but maybe not fully aware of that. There are a lot of activities which are conducted by you or your school in that field. Apologies, my dogs, I think, were just barking very loud behind. Okay, thanks, Tudia. Hand back over to you.
Thank you, Leonie. Yana shared something in the chat. So Yana said that in terms of climate, we collect batteries and we select waste. For anything else, we have no time in this state curriculum. So hopefully the curriculum will be more developed with more information. You will be leading, hopefully, in your school, building new curriculum for ESD in the future. Thank you for sharing, Yana. I just also would like to quickly share an experience when I joined ASAF's education department back in 2018. My colleagues, Leonie and the youth team just came back from doing a project from Slovenia and Croatia on sustainable tourism. And ever since, I think every time we went for lunch, we would talk about eating vegetarian food and how much, you know, if you were eating beef, for example, how it's contributing to how it's not sustainable for the planet. I think ever since, because everybody's talking about it, because there was you know, an environment where I was empowered through the knowledge that my colleagues gained and through their behaviors as well. So when I was seeing that on a daily basis, I started reducing my consumption for meat. And I think, so that's how I think we can create societal impact. When you see others taking actions, then you also start to take action. I think also Yana, oh, okay, hopefully, she said hopefully. We know you can do it, Yana. Okay, we will move on to the next slide. Thank you all for sharing. Okay. So, okay, here is a list of initiatives that got actually awarded by UNESCO. So there is an UNESCO ESD award that happens every year. So they will select at least 3 initiatives. So these are from 2018 and 2019. For example, there is one where they focused on cleaning West. That's called World Cleanup Day from Estonia. That was very inspiring. You can check details about each of these initiatives in the link below, and we will also include it in the reading list if you want to learn more about them. So you can see these are taken by different foundations and different organizations, and it covers different aspects. For example, the first one by Camp Hill Community Trust from Botswana, it's focused on work, integrated learning for living and work. So that's related to SDG 8, for example. So, and so UNESCO created a great list of resources for educators to know more about sustainable development and how to implement sustainable development goals and teaching about sustainable development goals in their education setting. So here is an example. You can see these are different resources, and you can scan the QR code and then you can download the book. So it's very easy to do. We will share the Dropbox link. Here is another example. Here we will, if you click these Dropbox links, you will find these resources and then you can download them. So the next step, of course, we have been learning, but I think it's really important that we reflect through some activity. So we designed an assignment for you. So UNESCO has a checklist for ESD schools. We will show the checklist a bit later. So we want you to take some time and critically reflect based on this checklist. Is your school an ESD school? And if yes, we would like to highlight it through our social media as well. We would like to know what makes your school an ESD school, again, based on the checklist. So if you could write a short summary within 250 words, that would be great. And if not, if if you see that the checklist, some of the checklists doesn't add up, and you can't find yourself to check those the list, then it would be great to also reflect and then write what kind of suggestions that you will provide as an educator to make the school an ESD school. And here is the checklist. So in the checklist, you can see that there are 4 categories. So the first one is, of course, the school governance, and there are three items in this under this category. So sustainable development is part of a school's policy or school's goal and vision, and everyone in the school shares a value on sustainability. And the school has a ESD team that is working together to implement different initiatives on ESD, supporting others on monitoring and evaluating initiatives on ESD. And then the teaching and learning. So in a school, the teachers know about sustainable development, and they know how it can be taught through different subjects. And then if school have an approach that is critical, creative, and future oriented, and then school empowers the students to take actions, not just teaching about sustainable development, but encouraging them to take concrete actions. And then, of course, facilities and operations, because without that, it will be very difficult to take actions or encourage other people to do something. So whether or not a school pays attention to biodiversity and nature, for example, let's say encouraging students to create garden and learning more about gardening for the sustainability of food, health and well-being, for example, ensuring mental health and well-being of teachers and students in their school in school environment, and not wasting any resources, for example, less printing, or schools that have food or meal plan, reducing the food waste during lunchtime, and of course energy, turning off lights and fans and or air conditioners when classes are done and schools are closed. And of course, responsible consumption, not just consuming because resources are available, but resources that you exactly need. So these are just some of the checklists that I think you can consult when you were reflecting on whether your school is ESD school or not. Yeah, that's it. And sorry, the last one is community partnership. Of course, community partnership is needed, whether school is working together with different stakeholders or not. And I invite Leonie to add a bit more.
Thank you, Jyoti. When you look at this checklist, I'm quite sure that a number of things most of you will be able to tick. And as it is with a lot of these larger frameworks, we see this also in the higher education sector. What is lacking is not necessarily the will or the actual operation or existing collaborations. It's very often the governance, very often the missing top strategy, which brings all the pieces together. Especially when you look here, for example, it's sustainable development is part of my school's policy or strategic plan. Yes, it is probably, but is this somewhere in the school, in a school document written? Is it like something which is, like a manifesto of the, like a declaration or something which everybody in the among the teaching colleagues is signing up for? So facilities and operations, I mean, the examples are manifold, and Jyoti mentioned many. Teaching and learning, it's probably embedded as well, and community partnerships, most of the schools are already doing this. The key issue is how is it in the schools governance embedded? Thanks, Jyoti.
Yeah. So that's about it, about education for sustainable development and yeah, so thank you for being here and giving us the opportunity to conduct this session on such an important topic. So we hope that you developed the necessary thematic knowledge, but this session is not, it doesn't end here for you to build knowledge on this topic. We'll have a peer-to-peer session after all the thematic sessions where you can reflect more that's when we will also share the, you can talk about the assignment. We'll have more assignment for the other thematic sessions. You'll get to know about them later. Yeah, so thank you all. We have some time. So Leonie, would you propose to have a short group discussion, or we end here?
Yeah, if anybody has a question, a comment, please let us know. Maybe we can stop the sharing and everybody can briefly switch on the video. The idea was to give a rough overview on the larger field of sustainable development, then focusing on education for sustainable development. And was quite happy to see in the chat that some of you said, no, I have never heard about it. But once you listen to it, actually there are things which you can associate with your ongoing activities. But the question is now how to promote it. It's the same with climate change. Somehow we feel it, but how do we grasp it and how do we actually fight against it? And that's probably the same with this education for sustainable development. It's something which is there, but we need to tackle it and work on it much more for having the results. So yeah, any feedback, comment? We share of course the PowerPoint, and we have a lot of resources, especially like guidebooks, which Judy has shared on the screen from UNESCO. So there's a lot out there. Okay, if nobody raises, then we always assume that you are digesting a good lunch, or after 6 hours or 7 hours teaching in school, you are just waiting for your lunch, and we are in between school sessions and your resting time. Okay, yeah. I see some nodding heads. Okay, good. Take maybe another 20-30 minutes after we shared with you the presentation. Look again through it, especially the graphics are very very powerful when you see how the various goals, for example, are influencing each other. There are also some of the graphics explain in a basic way larger complex situations, but yeah, easily. And yeah, we hope that when you do your checklist on is your school an ESD school, you can tick a lot, and the only thing you have to do is convince your headmaster, the principal, that an ESD strategy is needed to really not only have the foundation, but also build the proper roof for ESD in your institution. Good, then with this, we wish you a good afternoon. We'll see you in a few days. We have a special guest in a few days who will greet you much better than myself in your local languages. It's one of our colleagues, Grażyna Puławska. And yeah, Adam is smiling. She's Polish national. She is the Associate Director of our Department for Sustainable Development, and she will join us and give a presentation. And yeah, maybe she asks you the question in Polish or another V4 language, and then you will have many answers for us. No excuse. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.